to the front-end web development class. My name is Jeffrey. This is my first time using Google Hangouts. Is kind of sunsetting and turning into YouTube Live, or at least the whole Google Events thing. So I think it'll be the exact same as it was. It's the same window and everything. It's just a slightly different chat system, and you're looking at this via YouTube.com versus seeing it on Google+. So other than that, same stuff. Anyway, today we're going to be talking more about jQuery. We're going to start our recap on what we were talking about last week. I was talking just now about the assignment that we were working on last week. So the assignment for last week was to be able to type something in here and append a new item and have it show up. So as we were saying earlier, first thing you're doing is you're finding the add button on the page, and that's this thing. You can tell because if you inspect it, you'll see that it has a class of add, right? So when you click that, that's what we're using this on listener for. This on function that we can call after we find this .add using jQuery allows us to assign a listener to it. So we're passing in a string, click, and we're passing in a function as the second argument, which is what will happen when you click on that add button. So the first line of this function is we're using jQuery again to find all to-do list LIs on the page. So what's a to-do list LI? A to-do list LI is a list item that's inside something else that has a class of to-do list. So for example, if I select one of these things, you'll see that it's got an element name of LI. And if you go up the chain, you'll find that this has a class of to-do list. So it must be referring to all of these list items, these LIs, inside this with the class of to-do list. So we found all of those, but we don't want all of them. We only really need the first one and to make a clone of it. So first narrows down our array of list items on the page down to 1. And then clone allows us to take that array, take what's in that array and make a copy of it. So why do we want a copy of it? Because we're going to be putting that copy on the page. We don't want to affect the one that's already on the page. As long as we just say like .first, any changes we do to this is going to actually affect the element that's already still on the page. So we want to make a new one. So now that we've got this new item that's been assigned to this variable new item, we can change its text. Now this is where things get tricky because there's a lot of weird parentheses and dollar signs and parentheses again here. So let's break it down a little bit. As we know, stuff that happens inside parentheses happens first. So if you're ever confused about what's happening on a line of code, look for the innermost set of parentheses, and that'll help you out. Here's one. Here's another set of parentheses here. And then here's a third set of parentheses, but that's the outermost. You see how the other parentheses are nested inside that? So we don't have to worry about these parentheses yet. Let's see what's inside this first and see if we can get anything out of it. Because that's the first thing that happens. The first thing that happens is that we use jQuery, the $sign function, to find any element on the page with a class of new field. So let's just look for something with a class of new field. Here it is. This input element, which allows you to type something into here, has a class of new field. So that must mean that we are selecting that. Now we're chaining the val method off of that. The val method allows us to get the value of input fields on our page. Any sort of form element, like an input or a text area, that allows us to find out what the currently typed in value is. So, hello, that's the value of this field right now. So that's everything that we've done inside these parentheses. Val returns a string. So everything that happens inside that parentheses is going to eventually resolve into a string. So now that we have a string inside these parentheses, everything that I've got highlighted here is sort of replaced with that string. Then that string gets passed into this text method. The text method in jQuery allows us to do two things. It works very much like val in that if we don't pass anything into it, like we're not passing anything into val, you can see that these parentheses don't have anything in between them, right? Then all it does is just give you the string value of what the text is inside the new item. But if you put something inside these parentheses, as you see we're doing here, it works as a setter rather than a getter. So instead of getting something, instead of getting the value and returning a string, it doesn't return anything. Rather, it takes something that you provide as input and changes the text. So the text value of the new item is going to be this. So why val and why text? What's the difference between val and text? Val only applies, val stands for value. It only applies when we're talking about elements like input fields. This input field right here. But aren't these input fields? Can't you type into these? Well, maybe that's a little confusing because the only reason you can type into these elements here is because they have a special attribute here called content editable, which allows you to actually cause the field to be edited. But they're not input fields. Even though you can type into them, these are really just list items. And only a few elements, input, text area, select, allow you to get the value of them because those are things to be submitted with forms. These list items, on the other hand, as you can see, as I change the value of this stuff, it's actually just the value inside here, sorry, the text in between the opening and closing li tags, which gets changed. So that means we're changing the text around. So anyway, once we've gotten the value, the string, once we pass it into text, then the new item, which we've cloned, has a new text value. So it has new text. Sorry, I want to say new text value. It has new text, new inner text. But that's all well and good, but we've cloned it and we've changed the text. But because we've cloned it, we're now referring to an element that is floating off in the distance somewhere and doesn't actually live on the page yet. When you clone an element, you create a copy of it, but that doesn't mean that it immediately shows up on the page. You've copied it, but you haven't really pasted it, in other words, right? So you've simply got it in memory so you can make changes to it before you actually put it into the document. And that's what we're doing on line 4. What we're doing is we're selecting the to-do list. So the to-do list, again, is this UL with the class of to-do list. And we're appending the new item. Append is a method that takes something, whatever we pass into it, and adds it to the end of whatever element we just selected. So we've selected the to-do list, and we're appending the new item. So we're adding it to the end of it. That's what append does. So that's what happens every time you press click. Every time you press click, it takes the value of whatever's inside here. Let me do something other than that. Press add a new item. All that code runs, and there you go. It's added it to the top. If it's still a little hard to understand, then one thing that we can do in our dev tools, in our browser, is debug it. So let me step through debugging again. I'm going to set a breakpoint on line 2. A breakpoint essentially allows us to freeze at any point during our code running, and while our code is running, and take a look around and see exactly what's going on. It's helpful to have our console open as we debug. You can open up a little bottom console here. Don't worry about that, 404. You can open up this little console down here so you can both take a look at your code and also do some console debugging at the same time. So why don't we go ahead and do that? So how do we get the browser to freeze? Well, we need to get line 2 to run. So how do you get line 2 to run? How do you run line 2? How do we get it so the code in line 2 runs again? Anybody want to shout it out? How do you get line 2 to run again? Keep in mind, this function happens every time you click the add button, right? So how do you get line 2 to run again? Does everyone understand what I mean by run again? Does that make sense? Yeah, we want the code, we want the line 2 code to do its thing. We want it to happen. So what? Click the add button. Does that make sense? Because this function here, all the code inside it, lines 2, 3, 4, those will all only run if you click this add button. See, that's what that function is there for. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes? Okay, so let's do it. Now you see that this little thing pops up that says we're paused in the debugger, and line 2 gets highlighted. See how it becomes highlighted here? What's happening here is that line 2 is not going to it's not going to run the code on line 2 unless we press the resume button. or the step over button, which brings us on to line 3. Resume pretty much unpauses it, just does everything how you'd expect it to do. The little step over button right next to it allows us to just go to the next line, to the next line, to the next line. Yeah? I'm sorry? What do you mean pause by default? The debugger is not paused by default. It's only paused if we set a breakpoint on the line. If we don't set a breakpoint, then the debugger is inactive. It simply just isn't waiting for the code to do anything. The browser is just running the code. But the debugger has the ability to pause at any point that we set by clicking on one of these line numbers and setting a breakpoint. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're now on line 2. Line 2 has not yet run. But the cool thing about being paused on line 2 is that now we can use this console down here to write out some JavaScript and feel our way around. Anything that's accessible from within this function scope up here is also accessible down here in this console. So if I want to find the to-do item on the page, the to-do list, I really don't know why my dev tools are so extremely slow. Wow. I might have to do something about that. Things are very, very, very slow. I wonder if it's some sort of plugin that I'm using. Let me disable my extensions really quick just to make sure that it's, let's see. I don't need that. I don't need that either. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Yeah, I'll keep that. It doesn't matter. Google Docs, I'll keep that. Google Docs offline. 1 second. Page speed insights, do not need that. React Developer Tools, not right now. RSS subscription, that shouldn't change anything. Whom to follow changes Twitter's who to follow to whom to follow. It's very important. I'll keep that. And XML tree, that shouldn't make any difference. Okay, let me, whatever, okay. So here we are. I just ran to-do list li. And as you can see, I get an array in return. See this array because it's got this little square bracket here, right? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 list item elements. That's great. The cool thing about this array is that we got it using jQuery. And jQuery peppers its array with a lot of additional methods that live on it, like first and clone and val and append and text and on. All those methods are only available to us if we use jQuery to find the element in the first place. Because that array that's given back to us isn't just any plain array. You can't do this with just an array that you create. You can only do it with an array that you get from jQuery. So what we're doing there is, why don't we keep running it? Why don't we say to-do list li dot first. Sorry, I probably need to restart my tab here because something is slowing it down significantly. Very, 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 very slow. It's actually so slow that I feel it's crashed. So I'm going to go ahead and start over. Let's try that again. Ooh, it is still very slow, isn't it? Let's try this again. So again, to get this code to run, on line 2, it's slightly better. It's not much better. Is this happening for anyone else? Are their dev tools very slow, like when they try typing things in, or is it just me? It might be just me. It's not, yeah, okay. You are using the console to try to type things in? Yeah? Huh? Yeah, that's okay. Well. Oh, to do that, I think you can go ahead and press the escape button on your keyboard, or you can press the show console button in this little drop down here. That'll allow you to have them side by side. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that.
It's kind of slow on mine.
A little bit slow?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not sure what's going on there, but I do have some Chrome extensions running. I really don't think that should make a difference. But anyway, okay. I can probably turn off this filter. Nope. Well, whatever. Okay, so first, go ahead and run that. And where I once had 5, or actually now there's 4 because I only have 4 on there, I now only have 1 in this array. It just narrowed that down. It removed all the additional elements from that array. I only have 1 left. So check what happens. When I hover over this, there's a little thing that appears up there. It says LI 298 by 29. If I could scroll up, which I can't because my browser is paused, you would see that it's highlighting something on the page. I could right-click on this, and this element right here, I could right-click on it and say Reveal an Elements Panel. And you'll see that it's in the page right now. See, there's like this equals that equals the thing at the very top there. But if I do this, I'm going to hover over this, and nothing's hovering on the page. Reveal an Elements Panel? It's not in the Elements Panel. It's not there. So this clone is a full carbon copy of the thing that that is still on the page. But now that it's not on the page, I can make changes to it. It won't affect anything on the page, and I can do whatever I want. So that's all that I'm doing on line 2. I'm assigning this all to a variable called new item. So if I step over onto the next line, you press this little arrow that seems like a little curved over a dot to step over, brings us onto line 3. Oh, maybe it keeps us on line 2 a few times. Keep stepping over until your little highlighter goes on to line 3. I think the reason it's doing that is because there's a lot going on line 2. This function is being called, first is being called, clone is being called. So it needs to step over all 3 of those function calls to get onto line 3. Anyway, we're now on line 3. You can see that this is highlighted. So by this point, we should have a variable called new item that has a value. It's this thing. It's the cloned element. You see how I hover over it, it's not on the page? It's that cloned element. So what's happening inside these parentheses? New field. What's new field? New field is that input field right there. It's got a class of new field. I don't need to do a first or clone because I'm not going to be making any changes to it. I'm not going to be creating a copy of it. And I don't need to narrow it down to first because there is only one with an element of the class of new field on the page. And now I want to call the val method on it. And look, it just brings back a string of whatever I typed in up there. See, I typed in WEFWE because I was mashing on the keyboard, and that's the string that I get back by calling val. So now that this whole thing can essentially equate to just with that string there, now we can see that I'm going to pass that into the new item. So again, what's the new item right now? It's this. If I do new item.text, or I do text new field.val, same thing, right? And then I say new item again, then you can see that the content has changed, right? So that's what text does when you pass something into it. So now that's what's going to happen on line 3, even though we've kind of already done it. And now we're on to-do list.append new item. So first of all, what's to-do list? It's UL class to-do list. Okay, it's that whole thing, right? Append, put something at the end. So if we append new item, we can actually do it right here. We don't even have to wait for line 4 to run. So I'm just going to do it. In fact, I'm going to do it again, and again, and again. Oh, it only happens once because I guess it's still referring to that one element. So I guess you have to clone it again in order to append it again. But anyway, I've done that, and so that means line 4 isn't really going to do anything because I've already done that in my console. And there we go. That's the end of the function. So you can now press resume, and we're now out in the clear, and we can use the page again. So that's debugging. That allows us to step through different lines of code, break apart, seeing what each individual thing does. It even allows us to change some stuff around in our console outside of the realm of whatever's already written down, like codified in our code here. So we can make changes. We can poke at stuff. We can see how things change as we start typing stuff differently. And just in order to see if our code is doing what we expect it to do. Yeah, so that's how a debugger is helpful, and that's what jQuery is doing. So I kind of started this a little backwards. I didn't start with what I really actually should have recapped, which is jQuery is a JavaScript file which you download in order to be able to use the $ function that allows you to find things on the page and then do things to them, right? That's what jQuery does. What I should mention is that a lot of people say like, oh, I don't know any JavaScript, but I do know jQuery. That is not, that doesn't make any sense, because jQuery is written in the JavaScript language. jQuery is not a language, it is a JavaScript file. It is a JavaScript file that you include in your page in order for you to use the different sorts of helpful stuff that comes along with it. You can do everything with jQuery. You can do everything with plain JavaScript without including jQuery in your page. You know, you don't need jQuery, but it simply makes things a little bit easier. It creates an easier API or application programming interface for you to be able to work with your document. Again, it's really just meant to speed things up and make things a little smoothed over. There's a website, which is kind of funny. It's called You Might Not Need jQuery.com. You might not need jQuery. jQuery and its cousins are great, and use them if it makes it easier to develop. But take a moment to consider if you actually need it as a dependency. What's a dependency? A dependency is essentially something that your page needs in order to run, right? It depends on it. The more dependencies you have, the longer it takes to download your page, right? Because that's more and more and more files. So it's in your interest to keep your dependencies to a minimum. That said, jQuery is still very important, still very helpful. What's the oldest version of IE you need to support? Well, no one really uses, well, no, that's not true. Some people still use 9. No one uses 8 anymore, so you don't have to worry about that. But as you go down the page, you'll notice that stuff you can do with jQuery, you can also do just with built-in JavaScript, but sometimes it's actually a lot more complicated. We haven't talked about Ajax yet. We'll talk about that in a few weeks. But you'll see that this stuff is a little bit easier to read than this. There's just more lines of code. There's a whole bunch more going on here. Things like fading things in. If you want to fade something in nice and smoothly, you can do that using jQuery. It's very, very simple. You find an element and you tell it to fade in. You can't do that there's no fade in method that's built into your browser. So you have to write all this code that goes through a little request animation frame thing, which you guys don't have to worry about, and then just keeps running stuff over and over. But if you're looking to hide something on the page, you can just do that. If you're looking to show something on the page, you can just do that. If you want to add a class, well, it's a few lines easier in jQuery, but you can also do it with built-in stuff. What I'm trying to say is that, again, jQuery helps you out. It makes things it makes it easier for you to write code, and it makes it's harder for you to make mistakes because you're using pre-built stuff that's been battle tested, runs as fast as people can make it, and it prevents you from making any additional mistakes. But it's not necessary. It's just very helpful. That's all. Yes.
So whenever you load a page of jQuery, first has to load the entire jQuery file.
That's correct.
And then it runs jQuery stuff.
Yes. Yeah, that's one thing to know about JavaScript files in the first place. Here is the HTML for this page. Right here on line 15 and 16, I'm loading up jQuery, and I'm loading up script.js. Script.js can't even begin to download. The browser can't even start to make a request to download that file until this file, jQuery, has been downloaded and entirely run. The reason for that is because this file, jQuery.js, might say somewhere inside this JavaScript file, actually, I want to get rid of this script file. If there's a script file coming up, don't worry about it. Just get rid of it. Don't load it, right? So obviously, all of this needs to download and run before anything after it can run because the order of operations is very important. The downloading of JavaScript files is what's considered a blocking operation, where when you download it, it blocks the rest of the page from loading, which is why we put these script files down at the very bottom of our body as the last things on the page, because they're not blocking any of this other stuff from downloading, from displaying. Our CSS is up here at the very top, because our CSS is necessary to make this body render itself properly. Because the CSS determines how big things are, the color of things, where everything is placed on the page. If the CSS was to load after all the HTML, then you get this thing called a flash of unstyled content, or an FOUC, where where the page would show up in all black and white and would just be text on the page, Times New Roman, whatever else. Then the CSS would load, and then it would style the page. So you don't want that, right? So the order of operations is pretty important. You want to try to load your CSS at the top of your HTML. You want to try to load the rest of your body, the actual structural content part of your HTML next. Then you load all your JavaScript at the end in the order that they need to run. So that's why that order is important.
How do you periodically update your jQuery file?
That's a good question. So you're asking specifically about dependency management, about keeping your third-party libraries up to date. The answer is sometimes. jQuery's API hasn't changed much over the decade or so that it's been around. That is to say, the things that you can do with jQuery haven't really changed. They haven't added way too many things to it, but they have sped things up, and in some cases they fixed some bugs. They have increased the coverage of support for certain browsers. There are a lot of browsers out there. I mean, the majority of people use Chrome, then a lot of people use Firefox or Safari or mobile Safari or whatever. But you know, there are also browsers on your fridge, browsers on your thermostat, browsers on all your stupid Internet of Things stuff, right? And all of those things, they have some quirks about them, right? So oftentimes, a library like jQuery, which is used by hundreds of millions of people every day, if not billions, that is to say it's downloaded onto their computers and used a certain way, it's best if that library works the best they can. So the version of jQuery, they do come out with new versions. They often present bug fixes, not usually new functionality, but just things that fix some bugs, speed things up, cause stuff to happen a little bit faster. So it's often nice to upgrade. It's not a necessity in like 99.99% of the time. I would say if you used a version of jQuery that was 5 years old, it would still work just fine. But that's not necessarily the case for other third-party dependencies. There are other sorts of libraries that we'll be talking about, like Angular and React, and those things change at such a rapid pace that and people are learning new things about them and writing new things for them so quickly that things that were written a few months ago might not be the golden standard anymore. So it really, like I said, it depends. It varies from library to library. It depends on your situation. It does not have to be your responsibility to keep JavaScript, to keep jQuery up to date, but it doesn't hurt. So yeah, that's another good point. It doesn't hurt. You're never going to upgrade to the latest version of jQuery, and all of a sudden something's going to stop happening. In most cases, I'll talk about this really quickly, actually, since I'm on the topic. There's something called semver, or semantic versioning. A lot of things on the internet have version numbers. For example, jQuery has a version of 3.1.0. So why are there two dots there? Why is it 3.1.0? Why can't you just say version 3? We come to a new one, it's version 4. We come to a new one, it's version 5, or whatever. Huh? Yeah, that's exactly it. These three numbers are significant. The topmost number, 3, is called a major version. The 1 is a minor version, and the 0 is a patch version. The idea behind semantic versioning is that if the patch number changes, it's only meant to be a little improvement, a bug fix. Not any new functionality, but it's just that some bugs have been fixed. So it's barely ever a bad idea to upgrade to the latest patch version. So if 3.1.1 comes out, you're golden. Definitely use it. It will do nothing but help you. If 3.2.0 comes out, that means that they've added some new functionality. That maybe they've got a new method that you can use, some sort of thing that'll speed things up. But they haven't broken anything else. They haven't taken anything away or deprecated anything. That's a minor upgrade where now you have some better functionality. You can do new things, but nothing's broken. It's just added on. If jQuery 4 comes out, then you cannot be sure that upgrading will necessarily keep everything the way that it is. I would say in the case of jQuery that things are so concrete at this point that it's probably not a big deal. But for a lot of other pieces of code, libraries, applications out there, upgrading to a new major version usually means that the API has changed. That all of a sudden, stuff that you might have been using before, you cannot be 100% sure that it will continue to work the same way. That maybe you need to approach it a slightly different way, that they've made some changes. So that's what could happen if jQuery 4 comes out. So that's the idea behind semantic versioning. Each one of those numbers is significant for a different reason. Again, it's bug fixes for patch, it's feature additions for minor, and it's feature changes for major. So that's kind of the idea. Yeah, and you'll see that everywhere. You'll see that in a lot of other situations. Sometimes there's even like 3.1.0. very long number. And that very long number or combination of numbers and letters or something might be the git commit, or some specific commit that someone has made that doesn't actually have a number attached to it, but it's simply the version for the day, like 3.1.0.2016.08.29, that version, So you'll see things change around a little bit, but there is a specific thing, if you want to read up on it. It just talks about major.minor.patch. When you make incompatible changes, add functionality, and when you make backwards compatible bug fixes. That's what I'm talking about. Cool. So that's just what a lot of people like to do when they version their stuff. Okay. Let's see. Do I have any? No comment online. I have one viewer. Cool. New commenting little form there, so make use of it if you feel like it. Let's get started with our new material. This is the front-end web development class. My name is Jeffrey. We're going to continue on jQuery, and it's really going to be just a lot more of the same. So if things weren't 100%, last time around, then we're really just going to be kind of hammering those things in, introducing one or two additional features of the jQuery API, but nothing groundbreaking. We're going to get to a point at the end of this class where we realize that jQuery isn't necessarily the hammer for every nail. It isn't the solution that you want to go to for every application that you make. We're going to see with this, not this to-do list, but with our Twitter app that we've been working on, that some things start to get a little bit hairy, a little hard to manage when we continue to use jQuery, because there's no separation between the concept of the data you have on the page, like which tweets there are, who they're by, whether they've been favorited or liked or retweeted or something, and what's on the page. What's on the page is your data, and that sort of conflation can get very difficult. We'll talk about other libraries down the line, like Angular and React, that will allow you to, deal with that separation. But with jQuery, there is no such thing, and so I think we'll start to understand why that's a little bit of a problem by the end of this one. So we'll still see why it's useful, but also why it presents some challenges. So if you want to download the material we worked on last class, you can go right here. Oh, that's not it. Oh, great. No, you can't. Let's try that again. Class 6, the example we worked on last class. Okay, let's try that again. Here we are. Great. So if you want to get this material, the best way, as always, is to download this repository here. So you go ahead and do a git clone of fwd.git. If you already have it, do a git pull. If you don't know how to do any of that, just download the zip file. There's the button right there. And you will get it. LED ring isn't up. 1 second, really quick. On the LAN at least, what's your MAC address? Church, and your laptop apparently. That's my Wi-Fi address. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I'm currently on Wi-Fi, so if this broadcast ends up being a little kind of iffy and low bandwidth, low quality, that's why that's. Does anyone see a blue ring there? I really can't tell if it's on or not. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to tell. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so while I've been complaining about that, you guys can go ahead and, oh, here's some work that I'm working on. I'm going to close all that. Don't worry about that. Okay, so let's go over to Series 10, Class 6, I don't actually know why I'm in the terminal right now. You don't need to open up your terminal. You can do this all outside of the terminal. Let's try that again. FWD, series 10, class 6. Again, what I'd like you to do is if you already worked on this last week, just continue working on what you were working on last week. But if you want to make sure that your stuff is the same as what I've been working on, then go ahead and find series 10 class 6 folder, make a copy of it, and paste it somewhere else. Paste it outside of this folder, paste it in your own folder where you're working on your own code. Don't get it conflated with my code because that leads to problems. That said, I'm going to create stuff for my own code called just class 7. We're going to go in here. There's a few things you can get rid of. You can get rid of anything called assignment, solution, and start. That's just stuff for the assignment from last week, so you can just ignore it or get rid of it. So all you should really have left is these 5 files. All right. So let's open up index.html. You should probably just be able to double click on it and see what we got. So last week we made it so you can type something like hello, press tweet, and the tweet will show up. It has a time of now. It appears at the top of everything, and the text box is cleared out for us to be able to type something new. Tweet. Ta-da. There we go. So let's look really quickly at the code that we wrote to do that. So if you want to open up app.js, this is what you should see. So the first thing we're doing in app.js is assigning some variables. We're finding the form on the page, and we're also finding the text area on the page. We only have to do that once. That is to say, we don't have to do these 2 lines inside this function. Remember that when you assign variables outside of a function, you can also access them inside a function, as long as it has access to that outside scope, which it probably does. So this form and text area are being defined in the global scope. You can tell because they're not inside any function right now, so that means that everything will have access to them. So for example, down here on line 14, we're referring to text area. On line 4, we're referring to form. So also on line 7, we're also referring to text area. So that's great. Only found it once, and that's all good. Okay, so we got this form, and we're saying that when you submit the form, let's do a few things. Run this function. This function is going to be passed in an object called event. This is something that jQuery does. jQuery passes in an object with a lot of information about the event that just happened, such as what kind of event was it? It was a submit. What element did it happen to? It was on the form. What time did it happen? Did you press a button to cause the form to be submitted? What button was that? Has this event been prevented? That is to say, has the default been prevented? What does that even mean? This event object has a method on it called prevent default. Prevent default prevents the default behavior from occurring. By default, when you submit a form on any web page, that form is going to try to submit that information to the internet, which will in turn reload the page because that's pretty much how web browsers send information out. It's by loading web pages. If you didn't know that whenever you type in a URL and you press enter, you're sending information out to be able to receive a response, right? We'll talk more about HTTP in a later class. So we don't want that to happen though. As you can probably tell, when we press this button here, the page doesn't refresh. The page doesn't entirely reload itself. You would tell that it would, because if you press the reload button up here, everything goes away, right? So we can tell that the default behavior of submitting the form has been prevented by literally typing event.preventDefault. So that's what that does. Next thing that's happening is that we are getting the current value of the text area. This is very, very similar to what we were talking about in our recap. Getting the new tweet value, then we're finding the first tweet, cloning it, and we're finding things inside the tweet. We're finding tweet time and tweet content. Find is a lot like the $sign function, but you chain it off of something that you've already found, to find something inside it, right? So instead of finding every tweet time on the page, we're only going to be finding something with a class of tweet time that's inside new tweet. That's what find does. We're changing its text to now, and we're changing tweet content's text to whatever the tweet value is. See? Finally, we are taking the text area and setting its value to nothing. Note that this val is not like this val. This val up here is just a set of parentheses, but this val up here is a set of parentheses and also a set of quotation marks, right? Apostrophes. That means that we're passing a string in here. The string is empty, but it's still a string. So we're basically saying instead of getting the value of the text area, we're setting the value of text area to blank string. Finally, we're finding the list of tweets and we're prepending the new tweet. Prepend instead of append means put it at the beginning. So there we go, very much like our to-do list for the homework. So there you go. All right, everyone following along? Great, let's continue. What do we want to do this week? This week, I'd like to add 2 bits of functionality to this application. The first thing that I want to add is something you've probably seen if you've used Twitter before, which is a character count. Character count tells you how many characters you have remaining before you can't tweet, right? If you're not familiar with Twitter, you can only tweet up to 140 characters, and then the tweet button becomes disabled and you can't actually submit it. There's a limit. So we can enforce that limit, and we can also send feedback to the user to tell them, hey, you can't type anything else. We will do that by having a little number that appears to the left of the little tweet button that counts down as we start to type. So as we start to type, who's we? We as us, right? We as the user. Does that sound like an event that the user is causing to happen? Remember we talked about events last week. Events are things that the user does on the page. In most cases, it's the user. Sometimes the browser can create its own events. But in most cases, an event is a literal interaction between person and computer. And it's in the form of clicking, or typing, or dragging, or scrolling, or moving your mouse, or whatever else. There's a whole bunch of different events that can take place. So what event do we want to listen to count down the amount of characters that you have remaining in the text box? What sort of human interaction do you think we want to listen for to update the count of characters on the page? Huh? Typing. Typing, exactly. That's what a user does, right? So we want to listen for their typing. But here's the thing about typing. When you push your finger on a keyboard and you remove, that's actually 2 actions. There's key down and key up. Your browser can listen for both of those things, right? It can listen that you've held your key down on something, but at the time that that's occurred, right as that event is fired off, the character hasn't yet appeared on the screen. It's in between the key down and the key up that the character actually appears on the page. So do we want to listen for the key down function? That is to say, by the time that someone has keyed down on the page, will the character have already appeared on the page?
Yeah, we should.
That's not, no, it's actually not the case. The key down is what causes. So remember that events have default behavior. Like, for example, submitting a form causes the page to reload. Key down causes a character to appear on the page. But you can prevent that default behavior. So that means that by the time we listen for the key down, a character has not yet appeared on the page because we still have the opportunity to prevent that. That's not necessarily what we care about. We don't really care about preventing or allowing that text to appear on the page. As you might be familiar with Twitter, you can just keep typing forever and ever. Like, keep typing. And look, you can keep typing, but now you're in the negative, right? And the tweet button is disabled. So we don't want to prevent the person from typing. We just want to be able to give them an accurate count of how many characters are in the field. So I would say that instead of listening for the key down, we listen for the key up. Because we know that by the point they lift their key from the keyboard, the key that they have typed, the character they have typed, has appeared in the field. Does that make sense? Cool. So let's do it. So before we can listen for the key up event, we need to find something. What is the thing that we need to find? Exactly. We need to find the element on the page into which the user is typing. So that would be, in this case, the text area. Now, wouldn't you know it, we already have the text area. We've already found it. Really quick. Link lights. I'm going to try it. Sorry. Can't answer that right now. Okay, so we've already got the text area. So we can start with text area. And what's the method that we use to create an event listener? On. We're doing it right here. We're listening for submit on the form. So text area.on. And again, the event is called key up. One word, key up, no uppercase U or anything. It's not camel case. It's all lowercase, key up. And then we're going to cause a function to happen. So it looks a lot like line 4. Text area on key up, form on submit, function. We don't really care about the event being passed in. In this case, we're not going to be preventing the default from happening, so we don't really need to care about the event. It is going to be passed into this function, but we can ignore it. We don't need to create a variable name for it. We just don't need to use it. So I'm going to keep this function, this parentheses, blank, because we're not going to use what's going to be passed into us.
Is there, so all these default, jQuery side that we get, the documents, the jQuery where you can see all these things?
Yeah, it's actually not something coming from jQuery. These events are built into the browser. So if you're looking for browser events, you can search MDN for events. MDN is the Mozilla Developer Network. It's my golden standard for documentation on what's available. DOM events. DOM, Document Object Model events. Sent to notify code of interesting things that have taken place. So if we take a look at, for example, key up, there's also key press. A key is pressed down, and that key normally produces a character value. Use input instead. I don't really know what that means. Key up. The key up event is fired when a key is released. Let's see. Cancelable. Default action. None. Aha, interesting. I wonder if there's a default action for key down. Default action varies. Key press event. Launch text composition system. Blur and focus events. DOM activate event. Other event. So it does list out in very technical terms exactly what happens when you key down. But key up has no default behavior to prevent, so there's no need to prevent default. I actually didn't know that. I learned something. Cool. So let's continue. Text area on key up. Let's run this function. Again, what do we want to do? Yes?
So if somebody's like holding down like the O or something,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to counter because it's waiting for it to keep back up.
It is actually going to keep on typing. Again, the key up event doesn't cause anything to happen, but the key down event can cause multiple actual key presses to occur. That is the actual appearance of a character on the screen. So yeah, I mean, this is all happening. A single key down event happened, but I think a whole bunch of key press events are happening. Now I'm going to do a key up, which is going to prevent the key press events from occurring.
So like when you're holding it down, our counter will be going since we're only waiting for the key up.
That's correct. So it's not actually it's not as sophisticated as Twitter's actual thing, because I think it's listening for a bunch of key presses. But I think that code's a little bit more difficult to write because I think it has to update the count after the key press event occurs, and so it needs to do some sort of like little timeout to like wait for the DOM to actually refresh itself before it can update the count, and that's something that's a little bit too complicated. So instead of that, I'm just going to update the count when you actually lift your key from the keyboard, which in 99% of the cases is just fine. So yeah, really good question though. All right. So on key up, we want to get the current value of the text area, and then we want to find out how many characters are remaining, right? How many characters are remaining? That sounds like a little bit of arithmetic, right? What we should probably code into this file is how many characters maximum you should be able to type. So that's, I think, a variable that we should define, which is going to be our maximum. I'm going to create it up here. I'm going to say var character limit is going to be 140. Let's just number it. Simple as that. That looks like very basic JavaScript. Okay. So down here, I'm going to say, first thing we need to do is find the value of the text area. So var, text area, or, text area value equals text area dot val. Looks very, 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 very similar to line 8, doesn't it? New tweet value, text area value, same thing. Now that we've got the value, we need to do some math. We need to find out well, first thing we need to do actually is the text area value is find the length. But that's something that's built into every string. I talked about this, I think, 3 weeks ago at this point, 4 weeks ago, that to get the length of any string, to get how many characters there are in a string, you just do the string dot length. So we can do this. Var remaining characters equals character limit minus text area value dot length. Really, really simple math. We're creating a new variable here and assigning it 140 minus the length of the text area value. All right? Pretty straightforward. So that will tell us how many characters we have remaining. Now we want to take that remaining characters variable and insert it into the page. So where do we want to insert it? Well, it looks like our tweetbox form has a div inside it called tweetbox counter. See it sitting right next to the tweet button there? It's currently an empty div. It has nothing inside it. How convenient. Why don't we go ahead and use that and change its text content. Change the text, content. There you go. So we're going to find it. We're going to say tweetbox counter dot text remaining characters. Notice that I've got 2 underscores here. It's just part of my naming convention that I use for classes called Ben. Do we have to do anything else? I can't think of anything. I think that's pretty much everything that we need to do to be able to update the amount of characters on the page. So let's try it out. I'm going to reload this. And the moment I start typing, here we go. So that code is running every single time I lift my key from the keyboard. So any questions about this? Any confusion about why this works, how it works, what it's doing, etc.? Does it make sense? Yeah.
My version, it doesn't actually have multiple characters. Where when I press it down, it only shows a character when I key up.
That's right. So you're saying that it doesn't actually appear on the page until you key up?
Yeah.
So is the count incorrect?
Yeah.
Really? Really? Can I see that? That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Let your camera hear you? Oh, that's fine.
Like when I press down,
Yeah.
it doesn't.
That's right. What's happening there is that it's not actually going to run this function until you key up. So just to like look, G, see it's on the page. Oh, you're saying it doesn't repeat multiple characters. Oh, mine neither. The last few versions of macOS changed that behavior for a lot of keys, specifically vowels. Now when you hold down the key for vowels, it gives you a list of accents you can choose from. So you can choose like 1 through 8. You can say 5, and all of a sudden it becomes that sound or whatever, So it worked for me with exclamation points, and it should work for you too. But as you can see here, it doesn't actually update the count until I lift my key from the keyboard. See? So yeah, there you go. All right, so what's the next thing we need to do? I think the next thing we need to do is prevent the user from being able to submit their tweet if they've gone over 140, right? So what I specifically want to do is disable this tweet button. Make it so that tweet button simply becomes disabled, so you just can't click it. You can't submit your form. So everything's good so far. We can keep this as is. But the next thing we need to do is determine whether the remaining characters is less than 0. If the remaining characters is 0, that's fine. That means you've written a 140-character tweet, and you should feel proud of yourself. But if you go over that amount, that is to say, if you start going into the negative, we want to disable the button, the actual submit button. So it looks like this. If remaining characters is less than 0, then we need to find that button and set it to disabled. So it's called the tweetbox button. See right here? I've highlighted it. It's called tweetbox button. So we're going to select it with this class, tweetbox __ button. And then we want to change it to disabled. How do we do that? What does disabled mean? Well, this is actually something you might not know, but in HTML, if you want to make it so you can't click a button, you simply add an attribute of disabled to it. So like right here, I can say add attribute. Like inside my DevTools right here, I can open up a little menu, say add attribute, and then type disabled, and all of a sudden, I can't click this thing. Not clickable. It looks all grayed out. Once I remove that, it's clickable again. Great, right? So that is what's referred to as an attribute. I've talked about attributes a whole lot before. What are other attributes? Class is an attribute. Type is an attribute. Value is an attribute. Name, placeholder, href, rel. Those are all attributes. Type as well. So if you want to change any attributes, you can, well, let me take it back. If you want to change attributes, you can use the attr function, attr, but a little bit better for some reason, I don't exactly know the big difference, and a little more modern in the jQuery world is the prop, the prop method, which I recommend using instead. In fact, I probably shouldn't use the word attributes. I should use properties instead. I really don't know the difference, but all I know is that it's a best practice, quote unquote, to use prop. So it looks like this. Prop. So prop takes two things. The first thing you're going to pass into prop is the name of the property you want to change. The second thing you want to change is the value that you want to change that property to. Because as you can see here, each one of these properties or attributes or whatever has a name and a value. Name, value. So the first thing we're going to pass in is disabled. And the second one is going to be true. True simply adds that disabled attribute in there. It just sets it as a property. So it just shows up. Word wrap here. Word wrap, there we go. So, let's see what we got. I'm going to keep typing some stuff. And look what happens after I go past 0. I'm at -1 now, and I can't click the button anymore. Great. Okay. Let me delete a few things and re-enable the button. Oh, that didn't work. The button's still disabled. Anyone see why the button's still disabled? Is there any point at which I've re-enabled the button? If remaining characters is less than 0, set the property to disabled, of disabled to true. Okay, I did that. But is there anything in my code where I'm specifying that I don't want it to be true anymore? That I don't want it to be disabled anymore? No. Once this code runs and sets it to disabled, that's it. So I probably need an else, right? I probably need an else statement that sets it, that unsets it, right? Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So let's try it. All right. So every time we type something in, it's now going to check to see how many characters remain. And if it's less than 0, then we set it to disabled. If it's above 0 or 0 or above, then we remove disabled. So let's just do a few of these things. There we go. See? See how it's becoming disabled, and you can see in the HTML, the disabled is appearing and disappearing and appearing and disappearing. Does that make sense? You guys understanding it? Cool. All right. So here's a question. Can we simplify this code? Let's take a look at this thing here. Remaining characters less than 0. Remember what this less than operator does? It determines whether this is less than that. True. Sure. But what does it result in? Remember that operators like plus and minus and divide and equal and all the other stuff, all those operators result in new data, right? Result in some sort of a new thing, a new value. What does this result in? It results in either true or false. It results in a Boolean. There's no other example of that, but this, whenever you see this here, it's going to take whatever's on the left and whatever's on the right. It's going to compare the two. And this whole thing is going to result in either true or false, right? So now here's the next question. These two lines are very similar. In both of them, I'm finding the tweetbox button. I'm setting the disabled property, but I'm either setting it to true or false. Wouldn't it be a lot simpler if I could just take this here and replace true or false with this? Because what I'm saying here is that this little greater than operator is going to take this and set it to either yes or no, right? Like if I say, or true or false, I'm going to say like, is 3 less than 5? True. You see how this becomes true? So doesn't that mean that I could just replace this with this. Let's try it out. And now that I've done that, I can get rid of this. I can get rid of this. And there we are. Oops, trying to unindent it. How do I do that? There we go. So it's going to set the property to, it's going to set the disabled property to the result of remaining characters is less than 0, which is either true or false. See how that simplifies stuff?
The if clause.
Yeah, I didn't need the if clause because in both if and else, I was setting the property to something, and so I might as well just set it to this value, which will either be true or false, because that's what that less than symbol does. It either results in true or results in false, and then I can just pass that into this prop method as the second argument. Does that make sense? You guys confused? You got it? Sorry?
It's a little fast.
Okay. But you saw what I did, right? Which is that this was the old code. I said if remaining characters is less than 0, then set it to true. Otherwise, set it to false. What I'm doing instead is set it to remaining characters less than 0, which will either be true or false based on what remaining characters is, right? So there's no need for an if statement because the true or falseness is determined right here and then passed in as the second argument. So this either becomes true or it becomes false every time the code runs. Just like 3 less than 5 becomes true and 5 less than 3 becomes false.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there a scenario where we need to know both ways to kind of write it out like that?
It can always be simplified like that. I mean, like what I'm saying is there is definite use for if statements. There's always use for if statements. I mean, most definitely. But in the case where you're doing the same thing in both the if and the else statement, and the only difference is that you're passing in a true statement or true or false into something, then that's what you're already determining, so why write the code 2 times?
I see. So we should be scanning and seeing, is there a simpler way to write this?
There's always, yeah, you should always look for simpler ways to write things,
In this case, where's jQuery helping here? Is helping define what we left on it?
Sorry, where is jQuery helping?
Yeah.
jQuery is helping us by first finding the element on the page, and then being able to set the text of it, and then set the property of it. And jQuery is not helping on this line. This is just JavaScript, which is just this minus that equals that. jQuery is happening here because we're getting the value, but this is not jQuery. This is just setting the text, setting the string that we get to this text area value. So it's wherever you see these methods being chained off of things we found using jQuery, that jQuery is taking place. Again, jQuery is written in JavaScript. It's pure valid JavaScript. It's just that wherever you start with a $sign and start chaining things off of it is where you are making use of jQuery. But this remaining characters less than 0, there's nothing jQuery about what I've highlighted here. It's just JavaScript. It's just this less than that. Yeah. But being able to pass true as the second parameter of this prop thing, that is something that jQuery does. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that works still. I get to type stuff. And as I go, then all of a sudden it becomes disabled and it's no longer disabled. That's great. Okay. So that's almost done. One more thing. When I reload the page, that number is not there. Wouldn't it be great if I could see that number to start out with? So I know as I start to type how much I have remaining. So I could really easily just go into my HTML file and type 140 into my tweetbox counter. I could simply just go do 140, and we're done. But I don't know. I'd like to do it a little bit more of a programmatic way. I don't like the idea that 140 is in my HTML and that 140 is also stored in my JavaScript. Because what if I have to change it? That means it has to change in 2 different places, right? So wouldn't it be great if I could just have it in one place? So it seems to me like I need this code to run when the page first loads, right? If this code runs and sees, oh, it's a blank field, then it will set the value to 140, right? So why don't we just do that? So what do? Do I have to like initiate a key up? Do I have to tell the user, hey, before you do anything, type key up? No, we don't want to do that. We just need to run this function. So how do we run this function? Well, we need to extract this function from being passed into our key up thing and define it as something that we can just call like a straightforward, non-anonymous named function. And it looks like this. All I did was just cut and paste that whole function outside of this little onKeyUp thing and assign it to a variable called calculate remaining characters. So what do I type right here to replace it? Calculate remaining characters. Here's a question. Since this is a function, should I put an extra set of parentheses here?
No. Yes, because we're not passing any arguments.
I actually should not. Think of it this way. Before I passed in the word calculate remaining characters, I was doing this. I was taking this and pasting it right there. But you didn't see any parentheses there, right? I was just defining a function. And defining a function, assigning it to a variable, I have it here. I still have access to it. But when I put parentheses at the end, then that means I'm calling it. And certainly I want keyup to call this, but if I put these parentheses here right now, you missed a whole lot. If I put these parentheses here right now, then it would immediately call it. And I don't want that to happen. Because that means not only am I immediately calling it, but I'm also telling this text area on keyup to do nothing, actually, because this function doesn't return anything. So I would be passing in the return value rather than the function itself. So I definitely do not want these characters right here. I mean, sorry, these parentheses right here. I just want to pass in a reference to calculate remaining characters, this function. So that's great, but I haven't actually calculated remaining characters when the page loaded yet. So how do I do that? It's a very straightforward answer. How do I call a function?
Oh, the medicine.
No, that's how I call jQuery to find something on the page. This is how I call the jQuery function. Am I calling jQuery? Or am I calling calculate remaining characters? All right, so is that good? Is that all I need? Is this going to call this, or is it going to just say, here it is, this is a reference to it? It's a reference to it. So how do I call it? Parentheses. So what's the difference between this and the difference between this? Here, I'm passing this in for later use. I'm saying, hey, text area on keyup, do this. Here's the function that I want you to call down the road. But right here, I am immediately calling the function. And here I'm defining the function. So I'm defining it, I'm referencing it, and I'm calling it. 3 different things you can do with a function. All right? So that means that this code will be run when you key up, and it will also run immediately when the page loads, when this file loads. So let's try it out. I just reloaded the page, and it says 140. In fact, if you look really close, sometimes you'll see that it's blank for a split second, and then it appears as 140. That's because jQuery is adding that code to the page after the HTML has already been placed on the page. So that's just the fact of the matter that jQuery has to that the JavaScript has to wait for the rest of the page to load. So that's why you'll have that little flash there. There are ways to prevent that. You can sometimes have the JavaScript run before everything else on the page loads if you really care about it that way. But either way, that's what's going on. So you guys understand what's going on there? Cool. All right. Next question. Oops, let's not go to my email. Next question. Should this tweet button be enabled right now? Should I be able to tweet a blank tweet? Nope, I should not. So I think this code needs to change a little bit. The tweet box button should be disabled if remaining characters is less than 0. But I think the tweet box button should also be disabled if remaining characters is equal to the character limit, right? The character limit is 140. If remaining characters is 140, that means you haven't typed anything, right? Does that make sense? So it looks like this. So I don't know if I even talked about Boolean logic here, but this is something that is something where you can combine Boolean values into a greater Boolean value. It looks like this. True and true is true. True and false is false. False and false is false. It works that way. This is an AND operator. It basically takes two Booleans and combines them and sees if both of them are true. So that's what this operator does. It checks to see if both values on either side are true. There's also another operator called OR. True or true? That's true. You use pipes here. These are not L's, these are pipes. You do shift backslash, the little key above your return key. True or false is still true. So the difference there, see true or false and then true and false? True and false is false. True or false is true, right? It's saying, are either of these true? Yes. And then you say false or false. What will that be? No, it will be false. Because you're saying, is this true? No. Is this true? No. So it's false. All right? So if both of them are false, then it's still false in both the case of false and false. But if either of them is true in the case of or, then you get true. So that's it. Double ampersand or double pipe. Those are our Boolean logic operators. Yes, it is. Anyway, over here, what we're doing is taking remaining characters less than 0, and we're taking remaining characters is equal to character limit. Hold on a second. I used the wrong one. That's why it might be confusing, because I really should be saying OR. Because tweetbox button should be disabled if remaining characters is less than 0. Or if remaining characters is equal to character limit. Is there any possibility that this would ever happen? Remaining characters is less than 0 and remaining characters is character limit? What's character limit? It's 140, right? How can 140 be less than 0? It can't, right? So this is a typo. This is wrong. But this is correct. Remaining characters less than 0 or remaining characters equal to character limit. This whole thing is going to resolve into a Boolean statement, either true or false. And again, disabled will become either true or false. There you go. So that's what this OR means. All it does is just takes Booleans on one side, Booleans on the other. What's a Boolean? Again, it's true, false. True, false on one side, true, false on the other. Combines the two, checks to see, in the case of AND, if they're both true. And in the case of OR, if either of them is true. Any questions?
Could you explain that false? To me, I don't think they're going to cancel out. Two falses will cancel out into true.
True and false, there's no such thing as canceling out. There's just simply determining whether either of them is true or either of them is whatever. So in the case of AND, true and false, what we're saying is this value true?
True.
Is this value true?
It's false. So it is.
So that means that ampersand is checking to see if this is true, and it's also checking to see if this is true. It's saying if the sky is blue and the trees are green, then do something here, right? But if the sky is blue and the trees are, what's the color trees are right now?
Green. Green.
No, trees are green. Periwinkle. Perfect. Then you would get false there, right? You're just checking to see if two things are true. That's what and does. In the case of or, I mean, like we're talking about English here, really. We're saying, are trees green or the sky red?
Are we saying that are they is like to be what bird? Are they is like are they existing? Basically,
That's what true and false means.
it's just are because they
Yes, that's true. True is the value of truth.
true they exist. True false exist. False exists. It's true. So
So
true.
that is like if two things are true, it will always be true. And with that, if one thing is false, it will always be false.
Yeah.
But in R, if one thing is true and one thing is false, it will be true. But if both things are false, it will be false. So and
Okay, kind of.
so in and it's only you have only one kind
Majority rule.
I think you're getting more confused, and it would probably be easier if you actually just did a little bit of practice on your own. See what I mean? All right. So anyway, it will now be disabled as the page loads, right? Because it checks to see if is remaining characters less than 0? Is remaining characters less than 0?
No.
No, because remaining characters looks like 140. 140 is not less than 0. What's the character limit? 140. Is remaining characters equal to the character limit?
No.
Yes.
Yes. 140 is equal to 140. And so that means that this might be false, but this is true. Therefore, this entire thing is true. That's what or means. Okay? So there you go. We're done with that. Okay. So we now have a working form validation. That's what that is. It's checking to see if you can actually submit the form, because it makes sure that you type something in. It also makes sure that you haven't typed too much stuff in. Great. So we're done with calculate remaining characters. Next thing that I want to do. As you probably know, every time I open up Twitter, I dread that there's going to be something disgusting on my front page. Oh, here we go. Here's low tax from something awful. Yeah, okay. Cool. So, oh, lube, that's great. No, it's an advertisement. As you can see here, there's a retweet button and a like button. We're not going to talk about styling those buttons because that's not what JavaScript is about. JavaScript is not about CSS. But we do want to get this functionality to work. Is this actually funny? I want to sleep in a race car bed. Well, it looks like I'll have to settle for sleeping in a regular car. Oh, he actually completely copied that off of someone else. Yeah, so I'm not going to like that because someone else made that joke. But if I did, I'd press this button and the little number would increase, right? Anyway, I want to have like and retweet buttons that turn green or turn red when I click them, just to show that I've liked or retweeted said tweet, right? So first thing that I want to do is actually add them to the page. Before I can actually do anything there, I need to see them. I could do this with jQuery. I could say append like and retweet to everything on the page. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to go into my HTML and just make it actually part of the document. So go ahead and open up index.html. And right here, inside tweet details, underneath p class tweet content, let's add 2 buttons. Wait, a retweet is there first, right? All right, and then Okay, so I'm just going to do that for now. You could add it to the other ones, but I would hold off for a second. Just add into this first one for now. So look, we now have 2 buttons on the page. We have retweet and like. Hooray. Used to be called fave, now it's like. Okay. So this button is an element in HTML that actually creates buttons on the page that you can click, but as you can see, they're not doing anything. The default behavior of a button when you click it is nothing. Right? Makes sense? So let's cause something to happen. Now here's the thing. When I click the retweet button, I want the retweet button to turn green. When I click the like button, I want the like button to turn red. How do I distinguish between retweet and like? Do I need to figure out like the contents of retweet and the contents of each button to see if it says retweet or like? That sounds a little overbearing. What if I translated this page to a different language? Then I'd have to say if it equals retweet or if it equals retweet or something else. Like, I don't want to do that, right? So I want to a little bit more programmatically be able to select each one of these buttons. So how do I distinguish between these 2 buttons?
The logo?
Do you want me to add a logo to each button? I'm sorry?
ID or class?
Class. Let's use classes. As you can see, we're using classes throughout the document. Tweet content, tweet avatar, and as you can see throughout our code, we're using the classes to find each one of them. I know what you were talking about. You were talking that each one had an icon inside it, but we don't want to add an icon. This is not a CSS class. We're not working on adding images into them. So all I really want to do is I want to be able to select each one of these buttons separately. So I'm going to call this button class retweet and a button with the class of like. Okay. Now in my code, I can say .retweet, .like, and I can select it. Okay. So retweet .on click should look familiar. It is exactly like what we've got on line 30. It is exactly like what we've got on line 4. Retweet on click function. So instead of on submit or instead of on key up, we're listening for a click event on the retweet button. So specifically what I want to do is I want to change the retweet button to green. Well, let's think about that in a little way. When you click the retweet button on Twitter, hopefully something that I retweeted is not terrible. Oh yeah, this one's good. You'll notice that not only has the retweet button turned green, but the little text next to it turned green. Also, oh, this one's actually really good too. You'll see that little text appear at the top of the screen with the little thing saying that I retweeted this, right? So a lot of stuff about the tweet has changed just because I pressed the retweet button. So I could easily just add an additional class to this button here to make it turn green, right? But instead, I love this tweet a lot, but instead, I want to add a class to the entire tweet. What do I mean by the entire tweet? Well, as you can see, each one of these things has an article class, is an article with a class of tweet, 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 tweet. If I add a class to each one of those things, then I can style anything that I want inside of it. I can select specific tweets on the page that have a class of retweeted or liked. You know, I can like slim them down. I can say, only show me my retweeted stuff, only show me my liked stuff. I think it's a much better idea from a data integrity standpoint to be able to add that status of retweeted or liked to this element rather than the button all the way down here instead. Does that make sense? So let's do that. On click, I want to find the button that I just clicked, find the tweet that contains it, and add a class to that. So what do I mean by the tweet that contains it? See this button? We're going to keep going up until we find, look, it's this tweet, right? So that's the tweet that contains it. So it's going to be this. So, well, the first thing that we have to do is find out which retweet button was just clicked. So how do we do that? Because can we do this again? Can we say retweet? Is that going to work? Can we say like retweet.first? What if I click the second button? What if the second tweet on the page has a retweet button? Is that going to work? Is it going to select the right one? No, it's going to retweet the wrong thing, right? So how do I choose, how do I select the item that I just clicked? Sorry? Last clicked? Close. There's a specific variable. This is something new about JavaScript that I'm teaching right now. Something I didn't teach in the first two classes, but something that's part of JavaScript that jQuery makes use of. It's something called the context variable. Every function, when executed, has a special variable called this, THIS. It's called the context variable because it's talking about the context in which the function is executed. This is often used, this, THIS, is often used to refer to the object that is calling this function specifically. And in this case, the object that's calling this function is the button that was just clicked. So when we refer to this, it's the element on the page that was just clicked. We don't need to say var this. We don't need to pass it into this function or anything. It just exists. It's something special about JavaScript, that this is something that you can access whenever you're inside a function.
jQuery uses it for its advantage.
jQuery uses it specifically, defines it as the button that was just clicked, or the element that just emitted the event. So if we refer to this within this form, then it would be, within this function, it would be the form. If we refer to this within here, as long as we did text area on key up, it would be the text area. But we don't really need that because there's only one form on the page, there's only one text area on the page. But in this case, there might be multiple retweet buttons on the page, so we do need to refer to the specific one. So, is this a collection of jQuery elements? No, it's not. This is not a collection of jQuery elements. Even though jQuery has control over what gets passed in or what gets defined as this within this function, it's not actually referring to a collection or an array of jQuery elements. It's just referring to the raw DOM element. What do I mean by that? Well, it's the difference between this and this. Oh, sorry, let's try that again. This and this. This is jQuery finding us all retweets on the page. This is the built-in DOM API. This is something built into the browser. It's not jQuery finding us the button on the page. What's the difference between these two things? One's an array, one's not, exactly. And this array is that special jQuery array that has all the stuff on it. But this is not. This is here. It is not a special jQuery array with all the stuff on it. But we want to do special jQuery stuff to it. We want to be able to change it around. We want to be able to add classes. We want to be able to find stuff around it. So how do we send it back to jQuery to give us back an array of this thing? Pretty simple, just like that. I am not passing in a string to jQuery. This is the first time that I am not passing in a string to jQuery. You'll see here, every other time that I use the $, I'm always passing in a string. String, 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 string. But in this case, I'm not passing in a string. I'm passing in this. I'm not passing in this. I am not passing in .this. I am just passing in this, which again is the context variable referring to the element on the page. So that's important. But why am I passing it into jQuery? So I can chain other methods off of it that come to me from jQuery. By doing this, I get it back into that array where I can now do some jQuery stuff. So what I want to do specifically, is find the tweet container, the tweet specifically that contains this button. So we were able to use find earlier. Find allowed us to find an element inside something. But this is the opposite. We're looking for something outside of it. We're looking for something that contains it. So instead of find, we're going to be using a method called closest. Closest means keep going up the chain, parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, keep going and going and going until you find the closest element that matches this selector. So this is an easy way to traverse the DOM tree. Keep going up until you hit the root, or keep going up until you hit an element that matches the selector, has a class of tweet specifically. So this dot closest tweet, now that we have that tweet, what this does is it now returns a new collection of the tweet. Not the button anymore, but now we've got the tweet. So now we can say dot add class retweeted. Add class allows us to simply add a new class. Yep.
So this function, so when you first press the retweet button, you click on it.
Yeah.
It executes this, which contains an array of all the tweets that have retweet on it. Or
No, what's happening here is that when the page loads, it's going to look for every element on the page that has every element on the page that has a class of retweet, and it's going to attach this listener. So this code here on line 34 is only running once. This code here on line 35 is running every time you press the retweet button. Any retweet button, it's going to happen. So it's only finding all the retweet buttons once. But we'll actually get back to that because that might not be exactly what we want. But something smells great. When this code runs, every time this function runs, this could be something else. This could be the first button on the page, the second button on the page. This could change depending on what you clicked. So that's why we use this rather than retweet or whatever else. Because it needs to be the specific button that was clicked, not every button. That would be disaster, right? So anyway, we find the closest tweet that contains this button, and then we add a class of retweeted to it. So let's see what happens. Take a look at this article right here. I'm going to click the retweet button. Check it out. It now has a class of retweeted on it.
So this is basically like a refresher or like a remember button for you, like you forget stuff, basically.
Kind of. I mean, it's always referring to something specific. jQuery uses it to say, this is the thing that was just clicked, or this is the thing that was just submitted, this is the thing that was just key-upped, or whatever. So if you want to think of it that way, sure. Okay, so that's great. We've done that. So I'm going to switch gears for a second and write a little bit of CSS, because it's great that this article has a class of retweeted now, but we can't actually make any use of it, right? So you know, what we want to do is we want to change it so it looks green. So I'm going to open up style.css, because we don't add colors to our document using JavaScript. We add them using CSS. Right here at the very bottom of the file, I want to add a rule for retweeted. Now, should the tweet itself turn green? No, right? It's the button that should turn green. So really, shouldn't I be selecting retweet? Not really, because that's gonna make every retweet button green, right? So I want only the retweet buttons inside a retweeted tweet to become green. Does that make sense? Only the tweets that are retweeted do I want their retweet buttons to become green. Right? So it looks like this. That reads a little weird, but think of it this way. The retweet button inside a retweeted container. The retweet button, the retweet element, the retweet class element inside the retweeted class element will have a background of green. Green.
What would be a reason why you would want to do that?
Why would we want the retweet button to become green? Because that's what happens on Twitter.com. When you click the button, it becomes green. So that's what we're doing here. We're just reenacting what Twitter does. So let's try it. Ta-da! Great. Now I want to unretweet it. Oh, whoops! I can't do that. Looks like once I retweet it, that's it. Why don't we change that? Again, but really quick, let me just select this button and see here that it has a background of green because it is a button with a class of retweet inside an article with a class of retweeted. If I remove this, got rid of that, then as you can see, that rule no longer applies. Okay? So let's remove it programmatically. Do I have to check to see if the tweet has a class of retweeted and then add it if it doesn't and then remove it if it does? That kind of sounds like what I have to do, right? So I could write that code. I could say like, if this dot closest dot tweet dot has class, that's one thing I can say, has class retweeted, then remove class. Otherwise, add class. I could do that. Fortunately, jQuery knows that we're going to be doing that a whole lot, and I don't want to waste time writing all that. So I'm going to do toggle class. Ta-da! We've solved the problem. Toggle class means add it if it's there. I'm sorry, remove it if it's there. Add it if it's not there. So now we just create a little toggle. All it does is just add or remove a class. But yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. Okay, so let's try it out. Looks like it works. So jQuery, every single time we do that, is checking to see if this has a class of retweeted. And if it does, it gets rid of it. And if it doesn't, it adds it. So it just toggles it. Pretty helpful little function. Okay, so how do we do that for like buttons? Like dot on click this dot closest tweet dot toggle class liked. Ta-da! And let's change our CSS. Liked, like, background, red. Color of the okay. These 6 lines look kind of similar, and I could somehow combine them, but it's probably overkill. In both cases, I'm selecting a different button and adding a different class. So I think even though they look pretty similar, it's okay to keep them separate. If it turned out that there was a lot more functionality, like to each one of these that they were very, very similar, I would find some way to combine them and then create a function that passes in the different parameters, like the name of the class, the name of the tweet class, and all that sort of stuff. But this is fine. So let's try it out. Like, retweet, 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 and like. See? Retweeted and liked. This button becomes red because it has a rule of liked like, and this becomes green because it has a rule of retweet retweeted. Ta-da! Okay, so now here's a question. I'm going to add a new tweet. Hello, world. Oh, great. Retweet and like. They're there as well, right? Why is that? Because up here, I found the first tweet and I cloned it. And then I put it back on the page. You see that the first tweet on the page had the retweet and like buttons, right? So I just made a clone of it. So let's try to retweet it and like it. Doesn't work. Why is that? Let's check it out. Looks like they have a class of retweet and like. So that's weird. So back to what you were asking me. You were saying, when does this run? Every time we click that, are we finding every retweet button on the page and then running this thing? No. This only gets run once. This line finds every retweet button on the page and attaches a click listener to it. But what if you add a new element on the page that has a class of retweet? Has the click listener been added? We already ran it. When you clone elements and you put those clones on the page, those don't have event listeners attached to them. So they're not really perfect clones. It's got all the same, HTML attributes and everything, but it doesn't have all the same sort of JavaScript behavior attached to it. So that's a little bit of a problem. These things, despite having the proper classes of retweet and like, don't work. Because, again, this is important. When we ran line 34, it was when the page loaded. It was only the buttons that were currently on the page to which this click listener was added. You add new buttons with the same class, tough. It's already happened. Those click listeners have already been distributed, and it's not going to run line 34 again. Does that make sense? Why that's happening? So jQuery has a fix for this. Let's talk about events. Let's talk about propagation. When you click on it, when you click on this retweet button, are you just clicking on that retweet button? Here's a question. When I click on Hello World, am I also clicking on this tweet? I'm not cloning anything. When I click on Old MacDonald Had a Farm, right here, am I also clicking on this tweet, the container around it?
Yes.
When I click on Old MacDonald Had a Farm, am I clicking on the page?
Yes.
Yes, I am. I am, because this tweet contains this text. The page contains the tweet. This tweet, when I click on it, is contained by this section called tweets, right? So when I click on something, that event is actually propagating throughout. Not only am I clicking on Hello World, but I'm also clicking on this tweet. I'm also clicking on the collection of tweets. I'm also clicking on the whole body. I'm also clicking on the entire HTML thing. That click event is propagating upward. So in other words, I could listen for a click on the body and then figure out specifically where you clicked. So given that I can do that, wouldn't it make sense if I could attach a click listener to something that I know is on the page when it loads and will continue to be on the page, and then just figure out specifically the most specific element that I actually clicked on? See what I mean? What I'm saying is that if I add a new tweet to the page, but I added the event listener to, say, the list of tweets, which is not going away, couldn't I say, oh, look, the list of tweets was clicked on. Now figure out specifically what actual element was the target of the event. See what I mean? This is called event delegation. This is where specifically a larger element is basically saying, hey, I've been clicked. Who wants the event? Or maybe it's really the other way around. The deepest, most element says, hey, I've been clicked. Here it comes. I'm propagating this event upward. So this is the way jQuery does it. Again, this section class tweets isn't going anywhere. It's here when the page loads, and it stays here. It has stuff added to it, so it changes, but it's still there, right? So let's do this. Tweets.onClick retweet. On can take 3 arguments rather than 2. In fact, it can take a total of 4, but I don't really know what the 4th one does, so I'm not going to talk about that. But on can take 3 arguments. The first one is always going to be the event name. The second one could be this function, or it could be a specific thing called the target of the event. So what's actually happening here is that we're attaching the click listener to the tweet list. And what we're saying is, hey, tweet list, when you get clicked on, check to see if the actual target of the event has a class of retweet. If so, run this function. So it doesn't matter to this code if the retweet button is there when the page loads, or there after it's been added from some other code having added it to the page. That was a very weird sentence. As long as this thing receives a click on an element called retweet, it'll go ahead and run this function. So this is essentially the delegate target. How do I, let me just see some. API to jQuery. I just want to see specifically what it's called because I'm probably using the wrong term here. Selector. A selector string to filter the descendants of the selected elements that trigger the event. If the selector is not blah, blah, blah. So filter the descendants of the selected elements that trigger the event. So attach an event handler function to one or more events in the selected elements. So tweets is the thing that handles the event, but retweet is the element that is the target of the event.
The descendant.
The descendant of the event. It's the descendant, and it's only going to run the function if it turns out that you've clicked that descendant of this thing. So again, it takes the whole guesswork of does it exist on the page out of the equation, because this does exist on the page, and it doesn't matter if this yet exists on the page.
Adds to the list.
Adds to the list.
When you add a new tweet, it adds to the tweets list, so it's always listening to that.
It reminds you of it.
When you add a new tweet, this is what prepends a new tweet to the page,
Okay.
right? When you click on tweets, it checks to see if what you clicked on has a class of retweet. So it doesn't like necessarily change this function or anything. It's just checking to see what did you click on.
Okay.
So we do this here, tweets.onClick.like function. This still refers to the button that you clicked on, retweet or like, but now it doesn't matter if the it's not attaching. It's not going to update the list or anything. It's just there's no list. There is just a single tweets element on the page that's had the click listeners attached to it, and it's just going to check every time you click on it whether the target has a class of retweet or a target of like. So that's how it works. Let's try it out. Retweet, retweet, like. It works. Good stuff. So that's event delegation. That is, having a larger element, be the one that listens for stuff that happens to its children, because they might or might not exist when the listener is attached. And that's all I have for you. Oh, that is not all I have for you. One more thing. I've just retweeted and liked this tweet. I want to add a new tweet. oh, it looks like I've automatically retweeted and liked that tweet. Why is that? Watch it again. Retweet, like, add a new tweet. It's also retweeting. It's cloning the first element, right? We don't want that to happen. We don't want that state that the tweet has been retweeted and liked to be propagated to this newly created tweet. This is where our whole, depending on the DOM to be the like golden state of the whole application, that's where this whole thing falls apart. This is where we have to start undoing stuff that might have been done to the document to make further, additions and everything. This is where jQuery kind of falls apart. This is where we have to start thinking about the data on the page, about like what is retweeted, what is liked, what is the content of each tweet, what is the date, who is the author, all that sort of model information from the view of like, what are the classes, which tweets are in which order inside this list, what font size is Jeffrey HW, which image is loaded up, what's the rounded corners. Where is the tweet box in this is all eyesight view related stuff to more model related stuff of like what is the data that we're currently dealing with. And what we'll be doing in a few weeks is starting to talk about Angular and React, two libraries that aid in the separation of those two concepts of the model and the view being separate from one another. But really quick, let's go ahead and solve this problem the sort of down and dirty way. It looks like this. Every time we clone the tweet, we want to make sure that we get rid of any of the old state that's been attached to it. So there's no really easy way to do that. We don't really have this like golden standard of what a tweet should start out looking like. So we're simply just going to go ahead and say new tweet dot remove class retweeted liked. What remove class does is removes a class from an element. If you specify multiple things separated by a space, it tries to look for either of those classes and removes both of them. So instead of saying like dot remove class retweeted, dot remove class liked, you could do this if you wanted to. But you could also just combine the two because it'll just look for both of them and remove both of them, or either of them. So this is the extra line that we have to do to make sure that our next tweet is quote unquote pristine. But really there is no concept of what is a pristine tweet because we're always just making copies of what's on the page. So this whole copying thing is going to get more and more complicated and more dirty the further we go along. So there are better ways of doing this, and we'll talk about those in later classes and not talk about jQuery anymore. But anyway, now that I've done this, the new tweet doesn't have a class of retweeted. We got rid of it. And now we can just like and retweet separately. All right?
Could you just check the CSS for the red, the light?
It looks very much like retweeted retweet. If it's not working, remember that there's a space between liked and like. If that space isn't there, then it's referring to an element that has both class of liked and like. The same class, the same element. You don't want that. All right, so any questions online or anything? No questions online. Yep, I think that's it for me. Any questions? I've got some time for questions. Any confusions? Things.
This kind of reminds me of the else statement. Else, something about else, this, no, which.
Sure, those are all built-in keywords that JavaScript understands. This is a special keyword that has special meaning in JavaScript. Yep. Any other questions? Let me see what the next class is on. It might be on HTTP. I don't want to open all the bookmarks. Let's see, our previous series. The next class in the series, oh, interesting. So I'm going to take a break from talking about jQuery or JavaScript frameworks, and I'm going to talk about Bootstrap next week. I think I'll also talk about Harp. So Bootstrap is one of many frameworks that you can use to bootstrap the development of your application. Bootstrap is one of many solutions that gives you the ability to add a lot of nice looking UI elements. Lots of nice looking sorts of things that come with colors, come with interaction, come with a lot of different behavior that you don't have to define yourself. So it's very helpful in the case of a project where you don't really need to have very, very fine-tuned control over what every single component does. If you're looking to use stuff like menus and buttons and drop-downs and slideshows and tab bars and other sorts of things like that, then Bootstrap has all of that. It's basically there so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And Harp is going to be something that will allow us to create a project where we can start to learn certain languages that help us sort of kickstart our development and eventually generate a static website. So that's going to be the start of next week. It's going to be called Starting a New Project, because this is an example of an easy way for you to get started on something, you know, like, and have a nice, like, strong foundation. Yeah.
Next week's Labor Day.
Oh no, you're right. Not next week. 2 weeks from now. Sorry about that. I am taking off for Labor Day. Good call. Thanks for reminding me. I am definitely not here next week for that. Yes.
The class that you call it, you said it was a result. Didn't you say a result? Harp and Bootstrap. What do we call it?
Frameworks. Well, Bootstrap is a framework. Harp is a static site generator and server.
You used another word. You called it a result or something.
No, I didn't. Not sure, but either way, those are things we'll be talking about. Cool. All right. So I will be here on Thursday. I do have another assignment having to do with jQuery. It is clicking a button and making it change colors, so that's cute. Yeah, so look out for that. As usual, subscribe to one of these mailing lists to keep informed on further classes, future classes. Donate to NoiseBridge. That's always helpful. And I think that's it for this week.
Is Harp like Jekyll?
Harp is very much like Jekyll, yes. Harp is like Jekyll, middleman, other sorts of things like that. I like to use that specifically because it's very, very easy to get started with. Like extremely easy to teach. So, all right. See